Chapter 15, talking about the road to the Civil War, causes of the Civil War. The election of 1856 sees the creation or the prominence of the Republican Party. They're going to run Fremont as their candidate. Buchanan is going to win uh, because he's going to be able to carry the South and votes in the North. Um, Buchanan is a sympathizer to the South. In fact, the Southerners said that if Fremont were elected, that they were going to secede from the Union. Now, they will fulfill that promise when Lincoln becomes president in 1860. The Know Nothing Party, or the American Party, again, anti-foreigners, anti-Catholic, anti-immigrants, um, and they will side with Buchanan. Um, some Southerners call Fremont the Black Republican because of his uh, abolitionist or his sympathies towards African Americans. Um, Fear of disunion caused many Northerners to elect Buchanan. Another important case or event is the Dred Scott decision in 1857. Dred Scott had lived with his master for 5 years in Illinois and Wisconsin Territory. After his death, he sued for freedom based on the fact that he lived in a free soil. Now, of course, his master's wife believed that he was still her slave. And this goes to court, and Roger B. Taney, who is a Supreme Court justice, makes a ruling that infuriates the people in the North. He certainly was a states' rights kind of justice, um, and he will rule against Dred Scott. Sanford was the party that wanted to keep him as a slave. Um, so he's going to support the whole idea of slavery. Uh, his ruling comes down. He says, well, because Dred Scott is a black slave and not a citizen, he had no right to sue in federal court. As a result, all blacks in North or the South were no longer considered citizens. Slaves could not be taken away from their masters without due process of law. This was under the privacy property or private property clause in the Fifth Amendment. So slaves could not be moved into any removed from anyone anywhere that you were going, and so you could move slaves into an area that was considered a free soil area. The Missouri Compromise was ruled unconstitutional. The whole idea of popular sovereignty goes out the window. Many Northern supporters of popular sovereignty were horrified, including Stephen Douglas. This further split the Democratic Party along sectional lines. Republicans infuriated. Many claimed the decision was merely an opinion, not a decision, and thus not binding. Of course, the South is going to say, well, nonsense. This is the ruling coming from the Supreme Court that blacks are not citizens. And they have no standing in court, and you can't say anything in terms of whether a person can take a slave into a free area. You can't take it away from them. This is further going to split the North and the South. And so many of the Northerners are unwilling to honor the Supreme Court decision, thus, disunion was justified. The Lincoln Douglas debate is going to take place in 1856. Both men were running for the Senate in Illinois. Lincoln nomination speech for the Republican Party said this: "A house divided cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." Uh, so he is going to be later nominated, and certainly his prediction is true because it couldn't stand. Lincoln Douglas had a series of debates in Illinois. The one that was probably the most important is the Fremont debate, uh, which is going to pin Stephen Douglas down about the whole idea of popular sovereignty and whether slaves could be in territories or not. Um, Lincoln challenges Douglas to 7 debates. By the way, Douglas will win the Senate seat and Lincoln will lose, but interesting enough, later he will be nominated President of the United States, or for President for the Republican Party. The Freeport debates were the most famous. Uh, Lincoln forced Douglas to answer whether or not a territory could vote down slavery, despite of the Dred Scott decision. Douglas answered that territories could refuse to pass laws protecting slavery, thus effectively ending slavery in that territory. Now, this point that Douglas makes infuriates the South because they won't support him, because it looks like he's gone to the other side in terms of anti-slavery. So the Southerners believed that the Dred Scott decision was a just decision and that you couldn't prevent people to take slaves into a free territory. And the folks in those territories would have to uphold the law and not take slaves away. Of course, Douglas says, well, you could just pass laws that wouldn't protect slavery, and then you could essentially end slavery. He still believed in this popular sovereignty idea, but this Freeport doctrine or debate kind of sunk his chances of becoming president in 1860. Douglas's popular sovereignty position prevailed in the election, and he was elected in senator of Illinois, and Lincoln is defeated. But because of these debates, the spotlight is going to be on Lincoln, and he's going to be a candidate for the Republican Party in 1860. Another important event that takes place is John Brown's attack on Harper's Ferry in Virginia. He was hoping to secure the arms and start a slave insurrection in the South. Of course, the slaves weren't aware of what he was trying to do. His financial backers felt that this was justified, and if it could get weapons, this might start a revolt in the South. 7 innocent people were killed, including a free black. 10 others were wounded because of what he was doing. Most slaves were not aware of John Brown's actions, and no rebellion took place. Eventually, Brown was trapped in the armory, and eventually he surrendered to Robert E. Lee. Brown's followers were tried and hanged. Brown became a martyr in the North. The result of this raid, Brown is seen as an agent of Northern abolitionist conspiracy by the South. The South states began to organize militias to protect against future threats, and this was a seedbed for the Confederate Army. Perhaps the most immediate cause of disunion besides Lincoln's election was this particular raid on the South. Lincoln is going to be elected in 1860. He only received 40% of the vote, and not a single state went his direction. In fact, he wasn't on 10 ballots in southern states. They just refused to let him have any kind of political capital in the South. Southern states secede from Union. December 1860, South Carolina unanimously voted to secede from the Union because of Lincoln's election, and a variety of other reasons that we've talked about that just seem to come to a head. The election of 1860, 3 out and 1 run, and so Lincoln is going to be elected president. This shows the election results of 1860. Within 6 weeks, 6 other states secede: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Buchanan, who is still the president because Lincoln isn't going to be sworn in until January, says he's powerless to do anything about it. In April of 1861, Four other southern states secede, and the beginning of the Civil War takes place. Um, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas also secede. They refused to fight fellow Southerners when Lincoln called up 75,000 volunteers to force the restoration of the Union. So these four states bailed when Lincoln called up 75,000 to put down the secession. Um, the election of 1860, a nation coming apart. This cartoon showing that. Secession shows those states that seceded from the Union. Uh, Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, which were considered slave states, stayed in the Union. But the other 11 went their own way. Jefferson Davis is elected president. Robert E. Lee is given control of the Confederate forces. But Buchanan did very little to stop this. I believe that the Constitution did not give him the authority to stop secession with force. I believe that the Northern Army was not ready for war, and they probably weren't. Many of the advisors were pro-Southerners. Southern sentiment favored a peaceful settlement rather than going to war. Use of force was likely to divide border states like Maryland and Kentucky and convince them to secede. Reason for Southern secession mostly related to slavery. Political balance appeared to favor the North, and so that why not just bail out? The Republican Party appeared to be threatening states' rights, and particularly the issue of slavery. The abolitionists also were a factor. John Brown's raid. Many Southerners felt that secession was there was no other choice. Many Southerners wanted to end their dependence on Northern economy. The high tariff was devastating their economy. They wanted to develop their own banks and shipping. They wanted to go their own way. Southerners believed that they had the higher moral ground. They were protecting their rights and their homes. They believed in the compact theory that said the states made it, and if they wanted to get out, they could. They saw it as self-determination and a right of declare themselves independent. The Clinton Amendment was the final attempt at compromise. This was proposed by John J. Clinton of Kentucky, but this failed. And this was the last-ditch effort to appease the South. It simply said that slavery in the territories would be prohibited north of the 3630, but given full federal protection below the line. Even the new territory, if required, would be Cuba. But that never happened. And future states would certainly be popular sovereignty. The war really starts on the firing at Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861. This is a little memory aid that might help you memorize the reasons for the Civil War. Mrs. Nelson's almost gagged when Connie's kangaroo bit John's ear. Well, maybe you can remember that.